Hi, my name is Alex Brownsell. I'm the editor of M&M Global, and welcome to M&M Global's Mobile World Congress 2016 video panel debate. We're going to be talking about making mobile work for marketers, for advertisers, how the industry, the opportunities that it offers advertisers, why maybe they haven't been taken so far, and how we can get over that as an industry. And I'm joined by 4 experts here. Thank you very much all. Starting from Andrew on my right, could you just introduce yourselves, give a bit of an introduction of who you are and who you work for and what you're up to?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Andrew Moore. I run the demand development for AOL's mobile programmatic business. I've been in the role for just coming up to a year. And obviously what we do is we talk to buyers and bidders with a view to help stimulate the growth of programmatically delivered mobile activity.
Okay. Damon?
Damon Combrinck. I run operations globally for iProspect within the Density Aegis network, and essentially looking at ways in which we can evolve digital operations to sort of take into account the new way of working, which is not just in what is seen as the ad trafficking days, but more around how do you handle the buying, optimization, and handling data, essentially.
Thank you. Gaetano?
Hi. Gaetano, Faleo, so pretty Italian, pretty much. I head up the international team at Bliss. So Bliss is a location data company, so we basically work with worldwide advertisers and agencies, creating solutions based on location. And I joined them 8 months ago when we built the international team for the global platform. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And Nigel?
My name is Nigel Gilbert. I look after a strategic development function at AppNexus across EMEA. That means to say that having an eye on what the market developments look like across the buy side of the market or the sell side of the market, and making sure that AppNexus is prioritizing and acting accordingly to make sure that we can advance the interests of ourselves and the market at the same time. I've been with the business now for around 4 years. So going from a very small startup, if you like, in Europe to over 100 people, which is the situation now.
Fantastic. Well, we've got a wonderful mix of buy-side and sell-side of data and technology. So hopefully we'll be able to get to the bottom of some of the questions that I'm going to ask you. And firstly, starting with, this is a vast event. There's 100,000 people here. Mobile is going from strength to strength as a global industry or sector. I don't know if you call it a sector, but is that mobile centricity reflected within the ways that advertisers work? In your experience, you're seeing day-to-day what advertisers are up to. Are they really mobile-centric? And if not, why not? Anyone who's going to start? Andrew, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, at the end, why don't I have a stab at that? So I think there's an absolute aspiration. I think marketeers are understanding that consumers are absolutely reliant on mobile devices to do things like access the internet and to manage their lives. So I think marketeers want to understand how they can both reach audiences via mobile devices and, more importantly, engage audiences with the mobile devices. And if you look at things like spend in mobile advertising, certainly all of those numbers back up the fact that we are seeing a shift towards marketeers definitely doing a lot more in mobile channels and moving spend from other channels. I say it's an aspiration because whilst I think we're seeing that trend, I think marketers recognise that they could be doing more. And I still think that even though our industry is established, I think marketers could still benefit from greater knowledge and also greater confidence in their ability to really be able to take full advantage of the channel.
Yeah. Is that lack of confidence perhaps central to why things haven't gone faster? I'm looking at you to represent the advertisers here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of there being aspiration to do so. One of the components I think that's missing where it is potentially restricts that adoption that we need, or at least to match the growth that we're seeing in terms of consumers adopting mobile as their first mode of consumer media, is around the measurement piece. And I think that's something that too often is something that bubbles to the surface and then seems to be forgotten about, and then bubbles back to the surface again. And it's a challenge, I think, that the industry is facing. It's not sort of up to any one particular provider to necessarily resolve. I think we need to solve it as an issue. But I think from a marketer's standpoint is, and what we're seeing from an agency standpoint is, obviously marketers, they want to spend more on mobile, but how do you gauge how successful that is? Because to just, going back a few years, sort of for 5 years, it was mobile had to be as part of a media plan, but how much did you put towards that? And it really was guesswork. And unfortunately, I don't think we're sophisticated enough yet for us to have to say, actually, we've moved on from that. I think there's still an element of guesswork. We're having a little bit more visibility in terms of, what do I get back from mobile spend? The consumers are telling us that they want to be doing this, but how do we fast forward and essentially catch up so that we can actually do this? And measurements is something that's sort of very, it burns me, but also drives me, because I feel like that's an area where we can really make a difference, and that will increase that spend that we should be seeing.
Yeah. Did you think then that ROI has held things back a little bit? Knowing that investment is working.
Yeah, well, we can see being in sales from the last 8 years. 8 years ago was just impossible. 3 years ago started ramping up with mobile spend, and right now it's like mobile first campaign and cross screen. So literally tablet and desktop are like an extension of a mobile campaign. So it's the other way around. 2-3 years ago was desktop and a little bit of mobile here and there, because people are spending all the day. It's an extension of our body, so it makes sense to plan campaign with mobile first. So yeah, absolutely. Great.
I want to echo what the guys have said there, really. I think a lot of these things are great and very valid reasons why marketers aren't necessarily adopting it as they should. There's still 3 or 4, I think, misconceptions and real disparities with the mobile market. I think the first one still comes down to consumer behavior. It has to. It's just, we're in the realm of personal opinion here, don't see mobile as a standalone experience. In virtually every example, it's not. It's affiliated to something else. The most common and easiest one to comprehend is when you're watching TV. So you're watching a program, or you're watching another ad, or you're talking to people, and then you're engaging with your mobile. And there's no way what you're doing on your mobile is not influenced by those external factors. Outdoor advertising and TV in particular, radio again is another really big one. So I don't think that the behavior is fully understood. And when we say we link it with offline, or we link it with cross-platform, I think people just see that as a single sign-on, and now it's linked. So you've identified the user. It's like, well, great, but you've got to identify the experience as well. The second really big one, I think, is data. So there's this enormous misconception that there's less data available in mobile, when actually the complete opposite is true. Data creates way more, mobile creates way more data points than pretty much any other experience. I just think that the specific challenge there is because the market's still a little bit confusing, particularly for the marketer, based around that experience, and also based around the inconsistency of it. I think we could probably all agree the TV experience is highly consistent. 60 years, you still buy exactly the same thing in basically the same way. Now that's cool because everybody can understand it, and there's processes around how to execute that. But in mobile, we were talking about this earlier, the screen gets bigger, then smaller, then bigger, then smaller, and the data packages and what you end up doing with your phone, it's changing all the time. So it's very hard to find consistency around that. And for that reason, people tend to gravitate towards something that's just quite straightforward and consistent. Like, let's say, a single login, and they just push their budget to that. And then you can't get a lot of data back out of that either, which kind of feeds the other issues as well.
Yeah, mobile does. Just to touch on your points, I think, and you're right, I think mobile still sits in a silo from a marketing perspective, and you're absolutely right, it shouldn't do, but it does. And part of that is the fact that, if you're a marketeer and you can define your audiences typically, as happens today, via things like cookies, there's a Chinese wall as soon as you hit mobile, and all of a sudden it's this other thing that we need to figure out. And you're right. The quality and the depth of data within mobile is incredible, and you referenced location. What an incredible new data point that we have. So there's a rich well of data here. Unfortunately, there's a Chinese wall which separates the two, and I think as an industry, what we need to help marketers do is to get over that wall and to be able to look across the whole piece.
People end up saying, well, we need to do something in mobile, let's do location. or even worse, we need to do location, let's use mobile. And you just think, well, there's so much more you can do, and then perception becomes reality, right?
I was going to also add as well, you both pointed out essentially that, there's a wealth of data available, and you're right, that kind of almost exists in the silo, and there is a Chinese wall, so we can't tap into that data, which also brings about that conversation around relevancy. Right. Yeah. So again, we kind of go down the route of let's do mobile. By default, you extend your campaign that you're already running across desktop being the most common, and you just palm it off onto mobile. And again, we're seeing the change in consumer behavior as to what the five of us did on our mobiles 2 years ago versus what we're seeing today is very different. Well, it'll be different again, what we're seeing in, tomorrow or a year's time. So, yeah, again, how do we break that Chinese wall down? How do we leverage that data to bring about a degree of relevancy so that we can actually...
Yeah, it's got to be about capturing those data points and then being able to, I think, to a fairly deep level, actually analyse that, process it, and try to make it actionable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously no easy way to do that. Skill sets are a problem there. Everything that we talked about in programmatic, let's say 2 years ago, everybody's just staffed up in programmatic. And now we're telling them that now they need to staff up in mobile because that's a whole new ball game as well. And so people they need to catch up to that. My take would be we need to not make too many mistakes or presumptions in the meantime while we're closing that gap. Yeah. So that when we get there, we haven't offended all of the users and everything is not irreparable.
Well, it sounds like lots of challenges that do face marketers. Are there any sort of practical things, words of advice that you would have in terms of what they ought to do then to get themselves, ready and focused for mobile marketing world? If that's a structural thing to do with the way that teams are set up, as you said, mobile's kind of siloed out perhaps at the moment for a lot of brands. In terms of their partner setups, in terms of the way that they're trying to communicate messages. Is there any practical steps that they can take to try and get better at this? Anybody want to?
Well, did we say marketers rather, or the agencies?
Actually, well, I mean, let's start with marketers first. Yeah, actually, the brands themselves. Yeah.
Well, Damon's probably very well placed to answer this one.
I was going to say, I think those pretty much tie.
You go first.
Tie together. Yeah. You mentioned it earlier. I think it's something that we seem to be missing in the industry. And again, I'm not looking at this purely from an advertiser/an agency standpoint, but it's something that I look at the days of programmatic maybe 4 years ago, where there were very few people that could talk, very informatively about programmatic, what it was, how it worked. And I don't mean from just a pure conceptual standpoint, I'm talking about from a deep knowledge of the plumbing, as an example. I think you used the word earlier, skill set. There is a shortage of people in the know that have a mobile-centric view, I guess, but not from just purely the marketer standpoint, but more from an execution standpoint of how do you structure a mobile campaign, not from just a pure marketer standpoint, but from how is this practically delivered, as an example, and taking into account consumer experience right through to, hey, how was this built in the first place? I see there's a gap there. That would be step one for me, I guess.
Yeah, I would say, so no, I mean, I can actually speak slightly from my own experience that I think marketeers need to be more comfortable of experimenting and getting involved. What I've found, obviously working outside of the mobile industry and then within the mobile industry is you need to immerse yourself in it. You need to feel confident enough just to give it a go and start to understand what it means, what it looks like, and how you can make it relevant for your business. I think that I think we all accept on this panel that there is a shortage of kind of skills. So surely what we should be doing is upskilling our organisations. And the way that we do that is get involved. And I think that's really important. And yes, from a marketer's point of view, obviously no one wants to make mistakes. But if we don't try things, how are we ever going to learn? And I think, and again, probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is actually it almost, because mobile's to a degree quite siloed, there seems to be kind of fear around it. And actually, as soon as you get immersed in it, you start to realise, okay, it does make sense. And I can start to understand how this fits into my business and the organisation. So, if I were to give, to impart any advice, I would say, just get involved, and then you'll start to realise that actually it isn't this kind of alien concept, and there's a lot you can do with it. A bit of Dutch courage, then. That's the
Well, I think depends also if some clients are really switched on, some are a little bit more conservative. So some of them just see mobile like a risk. Because they think that mobile, it's a sad banner on a smartphone, where actually it's an entire world of data that you can use to profile an audience like in a new and smarter way. So I've seen few clients really into it, and they are really leading this new wave, and others are still a bit conservative, like, yeah, I'm going to do TV, that's it, and mobile, yeah, maybe, but it's changing, it's there, it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great point. Understanding as well how to sort of overcome the preconceptions that have been built up with mobile based on what it's been used for the last, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years. What I mean by that is, generally speaking, people didn't know what they were advertising on mobile for, and what you tended to find was they're driving app downloads or something like that. And that works, it's great, it's a pretty handy metric, which everybody can latch onto, and it's just a very valid metric as well. But then they've downloaded these apps into their new install base, their new customers, and great, that's great. You know, what do we do now? And the idea is, of course, to going back to that point of consumer behavior, how are you going to influence? You know, how are they going to get me, or how are they going to get Andrew to go and, you know, buy that toothpaste or test drive that car or whatever it is? That's really the goal. And by installing the toothpaste app is probably not going to do that. You know, they're going to need to find another way. So there's that misconception that it's really a performance channel. And while there was that huge discrepancy between supply and budget, it was used as a performance channel. And, you know, why not? So we need to overcome that mechanism. And then also this notion of attribution, because, you know, if everything has to come back to a click or a download, you know, TV doesn't have that problem. No. And that's where previously to mobile, we spent more of our time watching TV than we did anything else. So people used it as a branding channel where they could influence the way that we feel about their brand. And presumably mobile is an enormous opportunity to influence the way we feel about their brand. And again, this actually presumably comes down to what you two chaps were saying, which is you've got to get marketers who are good to test that. You know, they've got to embrace that rather than say, no, how many apps have you downloaded? How many have you installed? They've got to look towards something that's a little bit different to try to drive a different perception or a different approach to it.
Yeah, well, and that seems to go to the heart of one of the big messages that we're hearing over and over, which is that with mobile, the data is there, huge amounts of data, really varied. So the targeting, the precision is really possible, but perhaps, and maybe this goes down to the way that the agency world is structured, the creativity hasn't always been there. In mobile, you know, that kind of melding of creativity and data is perhaps the next step. And for different types of businesses here, how can partners help, and how should they help to perhaps bring this out?
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in very quickly. It's so interesting because I think arguably mobile today is so much more of a relevant channel for marketers, particularly around branding, than it has ever been before. And I think that's on 2 points. One, we've mentioned creativity. Certainly in the early days of mobile, the ad formats are very limited, were very small. If you're a brand marketer in particular, you have a very small canvas to really convey anything. And as a result, guess what? It was predominantly used as, for DR purposes, which worked great, but that was really all it could do in that form. When you look at what's happening from a creative point of view within mobile today, it's staggering. Full page interstitials, mobile video is just taking off incredible. Since 4G, and obviously accessing via Wi-Fi, people are generally consuming high quality video content on the phones, and advertising has followed. There's some amazing creative work that's happening within mobile devices. And whilst obviously mobile screens are getting bigger, but compared to television, obviously they're smaller. However, because of the personal nature of the relationship that you have with that device, the ability to really drive engagement is incredible on mobile devices. And certainly, from our perspective, we've done lots of research to try and understand how that looks. So again, my point would be that for a brand marketeer, I think they should be kind of looking to understand the capabilities today, because if their view of mobile is set from 5 years ago, then they're probably overlooking some quite significant opportunities, I think. Yeah. And that's just on the creative side. And obviously on the data side and the capabilities that can be done around data, and obviously Gaetano can talk more to this, but when you pair the data capabilities with the creative capabilities, I would argue that mobile is an incredible channel for for brand marketers today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the big revolution that's happening is that we have been used to just deliver a campaign with the content and channel targeting. It is very desktop oriented, while with all the data that are available there with a mobile, actually on a content, you can add a context, you can add a location, you can add an historical behavior. So all this data all together basically are just focusing more on people than just an internet user. So, and this revolution is actually happening right now when you add all these layers and you can literally target a single individual with a different creative message that can be just done and tailored for you. And this is the power of mobile, where actually the message is like, hey, did you enjoy your run? Have this drink right now, just when I stopped running. This is something that, okay, it's a bit scary for a few people, but it's like, wow, the brand actually knows what I'm doing, and it's not perceived like invasive, but it's a kind of revolution, and they feel like comfortable with the location that's actually delivering a message in real time, that moment.
Yeah, well, the capabilities sound amazing. I mean, but I'm just interested to know, as an industry, how well brands are set up to be able to actually deliver that kind of personalised, tailored message, which is obviously, you know, it's the ultimate aim, isn't it? You know, right person, right place, right message. Two of those three are definitely doable. Is the third doable as well?
It's an interesting thing, just the notion of sort of serving that message, right place, right time, you know, right moment. I think right. I have a concern around the degree of intrusiveness that can be, right, to a consumer. You said it can be a bit scary for a consumer, you know, gone for a run and now I'm being served this. I think that's where we need to be smarter around, and I'll use the word again, data, utilizing that data, because to make an assumption is potentially to push somebody too far. To that consumer then feels like, hey, you've invaded my privacy, right? However, if you're smart about how you're using that, and whether that be, you know, through using a, you know, say breadcrumb trail as an example to build a persona, or otherwise, without going too far in terms of feeling like they're being stalked, it's how do you know enough about that consumer to show them the right message, rather than just make the presumption it's the right message at the right time, at the right location. I think that's also, you know, it's... I don't want to take away from what you're saying is get involved, because you know, I firmly believe that, get involved. At the same time, a degree of...
have the guardrails, do it in the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I think you need to be a little bit cautious in some areas. It's certainly in the, you know, in the programmatic space where that real time or, you know, moment marketing is available. That's a theme.
We're only really set up to just start doing this now as well. I think, you know, it's not as though, you know, you can point your finger at you know, any kind of marketer or any kind of agency and say you should have been doing this. It's only really now that we mentioned skill set already. I think technology's been there for a while, that's for sure. But again, in a market that moves so quickly, and you know, the data management capabilities that certainly the agencies have had and the marketers have had are only really now in a place where they can actually process that kind of information and say, well, do you know what? I actually do know what message I want to show that guy, and I know who that guy is, and you know, where and when I want to target him. So I think that's really just arriving now. And I certainly agree with the point of the formats and the way that we use them being one of the most important considerations once we actually do figure out, you know, which ads to show. But I'm going to come back to the concept of de-siloing. And I think when it comes to the notion of creativity, of course, we know you can interpret creativity in a bunch of ways, how you use data or which formats you show. But I think it's the de-siloing. You know, you've got to make sure that you are associating your brand with the experience that person is actually going through. They're not just sitting there watching a TV, or they're not consuming content, you know, with an ad that's alongside it. And you can't just assume that retargeting is going to scale the market either, because it won't. and actually think it too much retargeting and too much personalization, we do run a risk.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that people don't necessarily like. They're like, how do you know?
It can be scary.
That I've just done that. All right, I'm deinstalling this. That's a bit too close for me. So that we know that there's a risk there as well. But that comes down to the analysis.
Yeah.
Like, how can you see where it's working and where it's not? And just critically, how do we de-silo mobile? Soon in a year's time, we come back to Mobile World Congress. We've seen all the virtual reality stuff that's going on this year. Next year, that's going to be mobile, right? Maybe there's going to be ads in that. You remember the augmented reality where you put the glasses on and you can look down Oxford Street. You can see where all the shops are. You can see where the brands are, and then you can interact with things just by looking at them. We've got to be careful about, again, being too specific and saying, well, that's what mobile is. Well, mobile is all of these things. It's really just a question of, are you in a position to process and understand what the behavior looks like? And to, smartly figure out, based on the knowledge of your brand, and brand managers, that we have to assume that that's their, that's the real strength that they carry. They really know how they want to engage and match the two things up.
A really good point of being creative in that is actually, I always like this example. So imagine for a sport brand, actually was used to put a banner or a video on Sky Sport, or the Guardian Sport, and that's just a Sky Sport reader that you're reaching. Imagine if you want to target like millennial football fans that are playing football. It's not the same of an adult football watcher. It's a totally different audience. So when you use data, like if we see this guy, on Sky Sport, fair enough. But if we see this guy on Wednesday on a football pitch playing football, if we see this guy in a sports bar on Friday, if we see this guy at Emirates Stadium on Sunday, this guy is not only a football lover, but it's a football player. So you can tailor a message that is actually buy these football boots instead of a branding message that can be for everyone. So the tactical use of data that a mobile can provide is endless. Basically, you can adapt in a fluid way accordingly to the guy that you want to eat. Can be any kind of person, 35, 45, we go like, kind of bigger scale, but if you want to target just 13, 19 playing football, then when you can have access to this data.
Allow me to be apocalyptic for a moment. And, we've been talking about all these opportunities, all this fantastic technology, but what if it's all too late and actually the mobile marketing and advertising experience to date has just been too awful for consumers to bear, and they're all going to install whatever ad blocking, ad fighting technologies they possibly can. We've had some announcements in Europe recently involving 3. How much of a danger is that? Is this just a passing storm, and actually, we're going to reach a place where mobile marketing is, there's a utility that's really appreciated by consumers, or is this actually something, a serious situation that needs fighting?
I think there's two things. There's kind of two things within that. One is, consumers are speaking in terms of, when you look at things like, downloads and use of ad blocking technology. So as an industry, that says to us, we've got something wrong, and we should really be thinking about what we're doing in terms of, kind of ad loads and also creative, and how we're interacting, how advertisers are interacting with consumers. And clearly that would suggest that we could probably do something better. So I think the first thing is, and broadly speaking, I think the industry is waking up to saying, okay, we should probably just start looking at this and thinking a bit more around it. And certainly there's countless examples across all organisations within our space where I think that message is really hitting home, and we're really looking to see what we can do to make advertising experiences more relevant, less intrusive in aggregate. So I think that's one thing which is definitely coming as a result of what's happening. The thing about mobile is interesting because a lot of, today a lot of the discussion around ad blocking really has been desktop based, because in desktop, obviously, you're able to predominantly download add-ons to browsers, and those add-ons will then remove ads. And, often a lot of that's to do with, firstly, the sheer ad experience and ad load. but it's also an individual consumer saying, basically voting, saying, I'm not happy with this experience, I'm going to switch off ads. So that's one thing. Mobile's slightly different, if I can say, certainly from our experience, that in mobile, there is a much clearer value proposition around advertising. And the way that I would describe it is, in mobile, you usually, let's say through apps, you usually have a choice. You can take the free app, and it's going to have advertising, or you pay for the premium app, and it doesn't have advertising, but you pay for it. And overwhelmingly, given that choice, consumers are taking the free app. And they therefore understand that advertising they're seeing is giving them a free content. So we've got this explicit value understanding in mobile, which perhaps hasn't existed to the same degree in desktop. However, if you think about what's happening from an ad blocking perspective in mobile, what we're actually seeing is the discussion isn't about users voting and downloading an add-on to remove ads. We're actually talking about something really quite different, which are the gateways, the operators installing technology. So I just think it's really interesting how I think mobile's probably quite different from a consumer perspective in terms of tolerance around advertising. But actually, the discussions we're really having about ad blocking mobile isn't about consumers expressing their choice. It's actually about the gateway owners making a choice, and I think the two things are really, really quite different.
I wanted to validate as well a lot of what Andrew's saying. There is a big difference between the two experiences, and to keep it focused on mobile and for the time being, of course, this being Mobile World Congress. A lot of it, I think, comes down to the actual mobile experience that the users have. So we're probably all very similar in terms of what we use our mobile for. I think there was a famous Mark Zuckerberg quote where he said, the only thing that people do on their mobiles more than social is messaging. And so essentially what you've got here is an experience where users are consuming all of their content via some sort of gateway. Usually something like Facebook or something like Twitter is where people will go, and then they'll aggregate their news from there and click through. Now, unfortunately, I'm sure we're all very familiar with those experiences. There's a huge disparity in the quality that you'll get. What I mean by that is you click on one link via a social platform and it will take you through to a quality publisher that doesn't necessarily abuse the page and has some fairly well-controlled advertising that's potentially relevant to what you're looking at. Equally, you can click through on an enormous selection of fairly low-quality sites that clearly abuse the privilege that the users click through to view their content and show you 5 ads before they show you any of the content that you wanted to see. Now, if that's your experience, where 3 out of 5 links you click are a very poor experience, you're going to start blocking ads. The irony there, of course, is that it's the way that you were consuming the content that was giving you the bad experience. If you consume content on your mobile similar to a way that you consumed it on your desktop, you wouldn't have necessarily the same experience, because people have home pages that they go to, or if they were going directly to the apps of their favored news channel, again, they wouldn't have the same experience. So I do understand it from a consumer perspective, and it's clearly worth highlighting that in mobile it's the operator level that so far, with the 2 examples that we've read about, that have made the choice to say, well, do you know what, we're going to block this. And that's not necessarily from a consumer experience perspective, that's for a different reason. So I think as is quite often the case, this isn't baked yet. I don't believe it to be apocalyptic, I'm sure nobody else here does. I just think it's a question of it has to find its natural parity. There will always be a portion of the market that don't want to see ads. There will always be people who walk past bus shelters or who always make the tea when the ads come on the tea, and they just don't see ads. They don't respond to them, they don't like them. So you could argue that natural progression could get us to a point where maybe let's not show those sort of ads to those people. It's not going to influence what they do. But we've got to find the way of carving out the right kind of demographic pools, rather than that happening via the initial machinations that we've seen, which is just ad blockers possibly marketing themselves in a way that increases the numbers beyond what they would naturally be.
I've over-exaggerated then. The end of the world is not nigh, let's say.
No, but it's really funny because when you ask a client, so what kind of format you want to run? Interstitial. And it's like, but you click on interstitial, no, I skip it. But it's a great click-through rate. So there is these 2 people in one person. This actually, as a consumer, doesn't like it, but as an advertiser is working. So there's always this. That's why it's always important to bring programmatically new formats, native formats, something that is a seamless communication. I'm reading an article, I'm watching a video, whatever it is, that is actually not stopping or distracting or too invasive with the users. But again, a lot of industry is still there, still planning that because it works. Simple as that. So the consumer sometimes is a little bit in the corner. It's like, yeah, it's fine. They will click.
Yeah.
But the other way, luckily, we are moving in a more native way where the consumer actually has more respect, can decide which kind of content it's going to interact with.
Consumer choice then, do you think that's key to it?
Yeah, I think so. I think also, you said, is it apocalyptic, this thing? I think in some ways it's a shake-up that we probably needed. You made a very good point of your experience of, certainly, putting myself in that position and being the guinea pig, if you like, with a lens over me and looking at my behaviors on desktop and my attitude to ads is very different to that of me being on a mobile or even in an app. And I've had some really great experiences, and I won't name the brand, but it's within the cycling world as an example, so something that's sort of close to my heart, but where if I'm exposed to this on my desktop, it has zero effect on me, and if anything, it probably annoys me, but the experience is not tailored properly to me on the desktop. However, in-app is a completely different experience. And so I think that's an example of where they've cleverly used whether it be data points, however they've built this persona of me, but are cleverly exposing this advertising, relevant, tailored advertising to me, in which case I would not want to block any content from them. However, because it's not the same level or quality on my desktop, then I'm probably more inclined to go down the route of saying, okay, I want an ad blocker to stop that. So I think it's the shake-up that we probably need. I think we do need to take it seriously. Apocalyptic, probably not necessarily there, I wouldn't have thought, but I think it's...
And to be fair, the technical solutions that a lot of people sometimes talk about, while they are theoretically possible, aren't necessarily viable. Because if somebody's chosen to block ads, and then you figure out a way to unblock them and then start showing them ads, that's not a great experience for anybody.
Yep.
So, I don't think that's really what anybody wants to build towards. I think the lean principles IAB UK have put in place is a great step in that direction. And if we can find the right type of collaboration with the consumer, not with the ad blockers, because there is somewhat of a proliferation. You might comply with one, but then there's a second one that's going to have a different set of regulations and compliance rules. So that's not the solution either. It's a question of the publisher building that narrative with their consumers, and really restoring that trust. But the technical solution isn't necessarily the long-term goal, I don't think.
Yeah. So rather than being apocalyptic, I just think it's a wake-up call for the industry, and I think the industry is actually responding really well to it.
It's a triangular debate, right? Advertisers have that right to sort of engage their consumers. Publishers have a right to monetize their content, and so it just keeps going around. And consumers have a right to consume their content. Because those three pillars, collaboration, I think, needs to happen at some point.
Well, I'm conscious that I don't want to keep any of you too much longer. There are lots to see on the floor. I'm sure everybody wants to try some virtual reality headsets and fight dragons and ride roller coasters. But for any brand marketers that are watching this, one piece of advice each to offer them when it comes to mobile, if you had to pick one thing that they should do or encourage them or a behaviour, what would it be? So starting with you, Andrew.
Okay, well, I've already given one piece of advice. Let me try and think of something different. I think I love the narrative around challenging perceptions. So what I would do is think about the biggest think about one of the major perception issues you have with mobile, and actually look into it to see A, if it's true, and B, if it's possible to circumnavigate that. So I would say, pick something that's meaningful and then look into it. And I think what you'll find is that quite probably you can move beyond it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Damon?
I think I'm probably going to add a few to that sentiment in the sense that from a brand's standpoint, it's that almost a leap of faith of understanding what is or what they would like their mobile experience to be for a consumer, as opposed to it being a poor relation in terms of the rest of a campaign, because it should be as part of the marketing mix, a holistic view of it. So almost challenging that view of, hey, what is a mobile campaign? What should a mobile campaign look like?
Yeah.
And then you've got to push your agencies, to help you figure that out, to deliver that.
Okay. Gaetano?
Well, I think an advice would be like use data in a smart way. That's just not too much. It can be, as they say before, it can be really too intrusive, but use data in a smart way, understand audience in a better way. And when you have profiled an audience, you can actually build a message that is bespoke for that audience. So the message is absolutely seen as part of their experience in daily life. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Nigel, to conclude?
Yeah, fourth is the hardest one. Kind of question, isn't it? One pops into your head, and then every time it goes down the line, it vanishes. No, look, these are all wonderful pieces of advice. I think that the best way to summarize this is you've got to test and learn. There's no way that you're going to get anywhere with regards to understanding your data or spreading, de-siloing mobile across your organization if you don't get out there and test it. There are literally hundreds of different things you can do. Whereas at the moment, it seems to all be very focused into sort of 3 or 4 activities that seems to be doing mobile. So broaden the horizons, test and learn.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much all. And enjoy the rest of Mobile World Congress 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.